Welcome back. The conversation now is on the journey of a budget. Of course, the 2016 budget, everybody knows, is already out, is waiting for the presidential assent. But the president says he will not sign it until he gets proper details on what the budget entails. The Speaker of the House of Representatives during the budget presentation made some comments with regards when the budget year should be and if the budget year should be reviewed. But let's quickly listen to what he said during this presentation of the budget by the president in December last year and come back and start the conversation.
While thanking Mr. President for meeting the constitutional requirement for the presentation of the budget estimates, I wish to reiterate that a well-crafted budget is not an end in itself. The real meat of a budget is in its implementation. While the National Assembly will endeavor to diligently scrutinize and pass the budget in good time to facilitate early commencement of its implementation. In this regard, and in order to aid Mr. President to execute and implement the budget, it may be necessary to take a second look at the constitutional definition of financial year. Section 318 of the Constitution of Nigeria 1999 as amended defines a financial year to mean any period of 12 months beginning on the first day of January in any year or such other date as the National Assembly may prescribe. The National Assembly going forward may need, therefore, to prescribe another date as the financial year in line with provisions of Section 318 of the Constitution whenever the budget is not passed before January 1st in any given year. The letter and spirit of the Constitution requires that the financial year shall not be less than 12 months. The date of commencement of the financial year may change, but not the 12 months period as prescribed in the Constitution. The budget would only have a realistic chance of implementation when the executive has 12 uninterrupted months to execute it. Mr. President's change agenda can only be realized for the benefit of the Nigerian people when his policies and programs are fully executed. This proposal will need to be effected in full consultation with the executive branch. We wish to give notice that oversight will be diligent, thorough, and intensive. Recent development, especially with what is now known as the arms gate, have proven the oversight must include following not just project implementation, but also the security and sanctity of unspent budgetary funds. On our part, and in the spirit of change that has come to the legislature, we promise Nigerians to hold Mr. President to every word, line, and provision of the budget when passed and subsequently assented to.
Speaker of the House of Representatives, Yakubu Dogara, talking there about budgeting. Of course, also stating very clearly what the budget year should be like. And so I'll be talking to Kenneth Irukume, who is the Director, Tax and Regulatory Services at PricewaterhouseCoopers, to get his perspectives on this. Good morning to you, Kenneth. Thank you for coming on the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, looking at the journey of a budget, we've had so many issues in times past, not just with this administration. We've had delays in the budget being prepared by ministries, departments and the agencies, of course, late deliberations at the National Assembly. But this time around is a situation of not having the details coming out as quickly as it should. So, do you think we have an understanding of what the budget really is supposed to be?
Well, I think there are clear statutory provisions on how the budget process should work. And I think that the executive as well as the legislature have a clear understanding of what it should be. The challenge is that with regards to those statutory provisions, there are not clear timelines in which certain processes should have been completed. The budget also, people assume, is just the presentation of the income and the expenditure of the country or of the federal government, but it goes above that. It's supposed to start first with a formulation of a policy, and then it goes to the legislative approval, then the implementation, and then the final one is actually reappraising the whole implementation to see if it has actually achieved its objectives. So the budget is not just the paper, it is actually a process. In terms of the timing and the statutory provisions, it all starts with what we call the medium-term expenditure framework, as well as the fiscal strategy paper. Now, the Financial Responsibility Act actually says that this medium-term expenditure framework report needs to be submitted with the National Assembly 4 months before the next financial year. So this should happen at least by August. And when that is submitted, the process should start because that actually has to be approved, and as well as the annual budget. How it works is the budget office of the Ministry of Finance would call the major revenue generating agencies, the NNPC, the FRS, and of course the Nigerian Customs, as well as some important agencies which would have to draw up this framework. When they do that, they come up with the revenue projections for the year. That revenue projections for the year would take into consideration the macroeconomic trends and certain other indices that would impact on how much we can generate as a country.
Talking about the issues that we have presently, and looking at it that this administration is coming in at a time when, of course, everybody already knows what the issues are. We're trying to reflate the economy.
Absolutely.
And looking at or listening to, the Speaker of the House of Representatives now, Honorable Dogara, it's very clear that at this point, nothing should delay the passage of the bill. So, if we understand all of that, does everybody understand that this entity called Nigeria is almost like, it's like a business?
Yeah.
For every business that has to run, you must have a budget for that year,
Correct.
even though you are working on a supplementary budget.
Yeah.
But you must have expended your supplementary budget by now, and you have to make plans for the future. So, in making plans for the future, does it seem like the Nigerians actually having a clear mapped out plan for what their future is going to be? And do you also think that based on that, there should now be a review of what really should be the start of a budget year, like the Speaker actually mentioned?
Okay, you've actually mentioned quite a lot of important things. I think one of the problems we have is that the law allows us to continue to spend for the next 6 months if a budget has not been passed. So the president can actually draw from the Consolidated Revenue Fund and spend for purposes of recurrent expenditure for the next 6 months if this budget is not passed. However, our problem is not recurrent expenditure. As a country, what we're looking at is we want some capital projects to happen immediately. If I pick up some of the comments from the Honorable Minister, Bola Raji Fashola, when he wrote towards the end of last year, he said that in terms of the construction industry, that they sampled about 4 companies and about 5,000 jobs were lost. And he said that if you look at job loss of about 200 companies and assuming 100 contracts to be implemented, it means that we have lost, or some families have lost revenue of up to 20,000 people. There is no economy that would run effectively this way because in terms of where we are as a country, we're challenged in terms of currency. We're also challenged in terms of our own revenue. So if there is no injection of money into the system, it means that even where we can actually make some progress, we're held back. My expectation personally is that a lot of companies which were hitherto very profitable in the past would not be so profitable this year. And that is because the purchasing power of people has actually dropped. Not just because of the loss of revenue from crude, but just because a lot of capital projects have not been implemented. So we need to deal with the timing, as you said, to ensure that the budget is passed in good time. So that we can actually begin to push some of these projects and we begin to see some things happening in the economy.
This is already April, and from your analysis, you say that by August we should begin to put together the next year's budget, not even September.
Correct.
So Looking at it, that the budget hasn't been passed, the 2016 budget hasn't been passed, we do not know for a certainty how much effectiveness it's going to be in terms of implementation.
Yeah.
And then we're already looking at preparing next year's fiscal plan already.
Yeah.
Why do you have that expression on your face? Because I think you have an idea of my next question.
Yeah, because we should already be planning for 2017. That's why I'm laughing, because we're already in April. We should be looking at 2017 budget already, but we haven't passed 2016. That's why I had that.
So
that
my question was
expression
going
on
to
my
be,
face.
we already have an idea of the impact. Over the years, so many conversations, everybody always says the same thing. The impact on the business and the economy will continue to be as heartfelt as we're feeling it right now. We're still having, you already mentioned a few scarcity FX challenges. We're having investors, exiting and the rest of it. At what point should we give?
Well, I think obviously we now need to look at the possibility of doing these things early rather than later. I think that in terms of the current administration, there's the political will for things to happen and for things to be, for most of the things to be gotten right. And I think that there'll be a lot of learning from the process which we've just gone through on the 2016. And I think that would impact on 2017.
Okay, so since we don't have, the budget starts in January,
yeah.
Should we have our next budget year, for instance, maybe the National Assembly should review it and put it at maybe for some time in April or maybe in August?
Yeah, so if we change the fiscal year, I don't think the problem is actually changing the fiscal year. I think the problem is actually rejigging the time in which when we start the whole process.
But if they change the fiscal year, then maybe, just maybe, we can meet up with, the time for us to, put together the budget and, of course, start spending.
You see, procrastination is not a function of whether you change time. It's actually getting the processes and the system right. So I think in terms of the financial year, the fiscal year, that is a given. What we need to do is to address the timing in which we start considering the budget rather than changing it. So we need to get the medium-term expenditure framework in at a particular time. We need the National Assembly to consider the proposals by the executive at a particular time, and all that needs to be wrapped up at a particular time. Now, there's so much flexibility in terms of the Constitution and the Fiscal Responsibility Act that there's no clear timing of when you should have concluded an action. So the National Assembly can afford to sit on this issue for a prolonged period, because there is nothing in statutes that says it must be concluded within 2 weeks or within 1 month. There is a funny provision in the Constitution, I think Section 59 of the Constitution, that says if the National Assembly passes on the bill to the President for assent and it is not done within 30 days, that a joint sitting of the National Assembly, which is the House of Reps and the Senate, can actually approve that bill and it will turn into law. That is a theoretical thing that can happen when there is when this horse trading cannot effectively be managed. But I think we shouldn't get there. What we should do is to get the timing right, do things at the right time, and actually hold people responsible to deliver in terms of what they should do.
Kenneth, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you very much.
Well, Business Morning continues in just a moment. Tola Abimbola, an investment analyst with AfriInvest, joins me after now as we take a look at the banks and the economy. Stay with us.